Okay, welcome everybody. I think we should get started. Welcome back. We were away for a couple of weeks and now we're back. Parshat Vayera, it's a very special parsha for us because it's the bar mitzvah parsha of our son Ari, Hashem Yikom Damo. So I recall somewhat fondly teaching it to him, although it was, like with all boys, pretty much an ordeal. And of course, the centerpiece of this week's parsha is the Akedah, but we're not going to talk about the Akedah today. We're going to take another subject and talk about a very, very strange dialogue that takes place in our parsha and try to understand exactly what's going on here and what the ramifications of it are. We all probably are familiar with the story. The angels come to Abraham and they are there partially to announce that he's going to have a son, a child, an heir. And then that's something that's not immediately shared with Sara, his wife. But then in this week's parsha, indeed, she learns that she's going to have a child. She's 90 years old. And the angels come, and the psukim, I'm going to read a little bit. They ask Abraham, Aye Sara ishtecha, where is Sara, your wife? And he says, in the tent. And then they say, Shoba shuv elecha ke'ed chaya, we're going to return in a year. Vaya bein l'Sara ishtecha, Sara will have a child. V'Sara shamat petach ha'oel, Sara hears this at what's going on at the entrance of the tent. V'hu acharav, it's a little bit tricky language here, and she is behind him, is usually translated that way, but it seems, as we'll see, maybe there's something more to that because it doesn't translate well. In any case, Abraham v'Sara zkenim, they're old, ba'im bayamim, getting along in days. Ba'im bayamim is also a difficult phrase because it says already that they're old. What are we adding by saying ba'im bayamim? There are a lot of commentaries on that. One of them is that literally Abraham came with a calendar of his days in order and recorded all of his activities in order to say to Hashem, look at how I spent my time. I didn't waste any days, ba'im bayamim, and therefore I'm asking for this great miracle that we should have a child. In any case, as the pasuk says, that chadal liyot l'Sara orach kanashim, she no longer had the ability to have a child. This is strange as well because the Gemara says, when earlier we said about Sara, akara ein la valad. So the Medrash comments and Rashi brings it. Not only we know if she's akara, barren, then she can't have children. So there, the Gemara says that she actually had no beit valad. She had no uterus. And she had no capability of bearing a child. That's part of the miracle. But that's not our subject for today. Now we're going to get into what I want to discuss with you. Vatitzchak Sara b'kirba limor. Sara laughs b'kirba, to herself, on the inside, literally, saying, Acharei v'loti hayita li edna v'adoni zakein. After I am so old, will I have this pleasure? Sometimes the word edna, which means pleasure, could mean period. And my husband is old as well. Vayomer Hashem el Abraham, and God says to Abraham, Lama zet tzachaka Sara? Why did Sara laugh? Lemor, saying, Ha'afum nam eleid vani zakanti? Can I truly give birth and being so old? Again, leaving out here the comment about Abraham being old and the famous comment of Rashi that God kind of told a white lie. He didn't quite quote everything that Sara had said in order to save peace or make peace, because maybe Abraham would feel insulted. It's hard for me to understand how he would feel insulted. She was saying about herself that she was old. So why is it insulting to Abraham? He actually is 10 years older than she is. But let's leave that go for a moment. Hayipalem Hashem davar. Is anything too hard for God? After all, the angels have said that in 1 year's time, you're going to have a child. So what's going on there with Sarah? Vatichachesh Sarah lemor, and Sarah denies what they claim she said. And she says, Lo tzachakti, I didn't laugh. Ki yareah, because, and this is kind of a, not quoting her directly, at least according to the main commentary, but just saying about this comment, I didn't laugh because she was afraid. Vayomer, and he said, Lo, ki tzachakt, no, you did laugh. This is a very, very strange exchange between them. First of all, we don't know who the Vayomer is. He said, no, you did laugh. Who's saying that? Is that Abraham or is that God? Because God is the one who seems to be the speaker here in saying, why did Sarah laugh? So the questions abound here, and I'll give you a few of them. First of all, first and foremost, that any woman would say immediately, why is Sarah being picked on for laughing? Because Abraham does the same exact thing. We read earlier in last week's Parsha, in 17th parak, 17th pasuk, it's easy to look up, 17:17. This is after God says to Abraham, I'm changing Sarai's name to Sarah, and you're going to be blessed with a child. How does Abraham react? Vayipol Abraham al panav vayitzchak. He falls on his face laughing. What? Halaben me'ashani valed vim Sara batishim shana teled. Will a couple of 190 years old respectively have a child? So he laughed first. So why is this commotion being made about the fact that Sarah lied? That's the first question. Now, the classic answer, I think, to this is that there are different kinds of laughter there, and we all know that's true. You can practice yourself in your laughing. Sometimes you'll say, ha, like a surprise laugh. Sometimes it'll be a kind of derisive laugh where you'll say, ha, ha, like, yeah, sure, that's going to happen. Sometimes, of course, it's a happy laugh. So someone to say that Abraham's laugh was a happy laugh and Sarah's laugh was a laugh of disbelief, almost like, huh? What we would call it, huh? And nobody can really say that for certainty because we can't hear the laugh. It's on the printed page. It's not a video. So we don't know what kind of a laugh, but they'll tell you, well, Abraham's laugh was kosher and Sarah's laugh was not so kosher. I once remember asking my Rebbe about this, and he said to me, he gave a different answer. He said, maybe they both laugh the same way, but for a man to be in disbelief and think something is impossible, well, men are beasts. They don't, they're not at the level of a woman. But for Sarah, especially Sara, who has this elevated sense of intuition and is, in a sense, closer to God, for her to laugh, that's already something that God takes note of and maybe even criticizes. He expects more from women because they're more sophisticated and they're more spiritually inclined than men are. Sorry to the men, but that's what he told me, and I think he's right. So this first question is, what's the difference between their laughing? That's number one. Number two, Rashi notes that Hashem omits Sarah's comment, as we said, and my husband is also old. In the interest of shalom bayit, if you want to call it, But if God really wanted shalom between the couple, why did he have to say anything at all? Why did he mix in? We didn't need a third party to get involved in this in order to stir the pot. He could have just said nothing. So something else must be going on here. The next question is, Sara never really claimed that she was too old to have a child. That's something that Abraham claimed. Sara just simply said that she's talking about Edna. She didn't say, I can't have a child. Her exact words were, Acharei veloti haita li Edna. It's hard to translate the word veloti, but it doesn't necessarily mean old. But it doesn't, she's clearly talking about Edna, pleasure. Maybe she means having a child at that age, 90 years old. How am I going to take care of him? I'm not the spry young person that I was 60 years ago. And maybe that's what she means. It'll be difficult for her. And finally, if laughing is apparently such a negative thing that God draws attention to it, then why is Yitzchak stuck with that name forever? What's the whole idea behind giving the child that name? If it's a negative, you want to name a child a positive thing. And laughter is positive. But if it's here being criticized, maybe you don't want to, and God draws attention to it in a negative way, maybe you don't want to saddle your kid with that name, so you're always reminded of it. So we have to try to work through this dialogue and understand perhaps a different aspect or different emphasis on what's going on here. First of all, let's remember that Sara has a heightened sense of Ruach HaKodesh over and above her husband. We know in first of all, that she is the one who insists that Yishmael be expelled from the house against the will of Abraham. He doesn't want to do it. And Hashem makes it happen by telling Abraham, in Susie's favorite phrase, Kol asher tomar alecha Sara shema b'kola. Whatever Sara tells you, listen to her. Shema b'kola, not likola. It doesn't mean just to hear what she said, but b'kola means to understand that she knows whereof she speaks. It's not just the words that she says, but behind it, b'kola means that there is already a deeper understanding of the situation, and therefore she takes precedence. So I will suggest, she has this deeper inspiration and deeper spiritual knowledge. And this intuition deep in her soul, bikirba, from the word the pasuk uses, deep inside, she knows something else besides having the baby, besides having a son. And that perhaps we see from the word Edna. We use this as a name. It's a beautiful name, Edna, but it connects to the word Od. And she, which means another. She perhaps senses that there's something else involved here. There's another challenge coming her way and their way. And that, of course, is the traumatic episode of the Akedah. That's on the horizon. It's not going to happen for 37 years, but she senses that having this child is going to create a major challenge in their life and a major trauma in their life. Indeed, according to most authorities, Sara dies immediately after the Akedah. So she senses that. And perhaps she is concerned that, okay, maybe I can handle it, even though perhaps she doesn't handle it. But I'm just going to close the window here, sorry. Okay, make it a little quieter. But maybe she thinks Abraham can't handle it. That's why she says that he is old, even though that's left out Hashem's statement, but maybe that's what she was getting at. Maybe he won't be able to handle it at his age. And that's why she denies laughing out of a sense of disbelief, as if she's lost her faith that God can't perform miracles. Yes, she knows God can perform miracles. That's not what creates this laugh. She says, the words of the pasuk are, when they have this discussion, lo tzachakti ki areya, and we translated it that Sarah's denial is, I didn't laugh, but she's not saying ki areya. That's a kind of a narrator statement. She said this because she was afraid, but maybe she says all four words, but it reads differently. Remember, there's no punctuation in the Torah. There's no commas, no question marks. So purposely, by the way, so that you can come up with some different explanations of the meaning of the pasuk. So maybe what she's saying is, lo, no, tzachakti ki areya. I laughed because I was afraid. Yareya has many meanings, but here it means I was afraid. She's saying, I laughed because of fear that perhaps the Akedah will end disastrously. And that's why she, in a sense, laughed. It wasn't the laugh of disbelief. It wasn't the laugh of joy. It was a laugh of fear. You know, sometimes when you're afraid, and we've all perhaps seen this, one of the reactions of being, let's say, in turmoil is it doesn't seem to fit, but you laugh. We've all seen this. People will laugh. It's very out of place, but sometimes that's the reaction. And perhaps that's what she's laughing about. Sachakti ki areya. I laughed because of fear of what's coming. She sensed the Akedah is coming. And then Hashem reassures her that everything will be well, that they'll come out of this nisayon with joy and happiness. And that's why Abraham is brought into the conversation too, in order to reassure him. That's why they're both present there. Otherwise, what is Hashem mixing it up and making trouble for this couple? Because he wants them to know it's going to work out okay. And in the discussion of the Akedah, one of the interesting things about it is that part of Abraham says, I know I'm going to get through this. That's why he says to Ishmael and Eliezer that we're going on to the Akedah. And then he says, V'anachnu nachzor, we too will come back. Part of Abraham is worried, but another part of Abraham says, I've already been assured that everything's going to be okay. And that's exactly why Yitzchak bears the name that he does. It's a timeless message in that name, that ultimately we who are Yitzchak's descendants, we're going to rejoice with laughter, even though we're going to go through all kinds of trials and tribulations that we'll face in our history, just as Yitzchak went through the Akedah. Ultimately, the name Yitzchak, and this is a beautiful kind of Kabbalistic idea, the name Yitzchak will be read as we do it today at the Brit of every Jewish boy. We have this prayer that we say, first of all, that we mention the Avot. And if you've ever been to a Brit, you might find this to be very unusual and maybe even a mistake, that we say, Asher Karatet Abraham, that God made this Brit, this covenant with Abraham, Ushvuato liYitzchak, and he gave his word to Yitzchak. We don't say Yitzchak with a tzadi, we say Yitzchak with a samach. And that's how you have to read this prayer that's said at every Brit Milah. I've been to more than one Brit Milah where somebody looks at that and says, oh, there must be a typo. There can't be Yitzchak with a sin. It's got to be a tzadi, but it's not. And then and I will correct them. unfortunately, I have to say, I've done it more than once with the rabbi who was reading it and said, I don't want to criticize other rabbis, but whatever, said Yitzchak, but it's not. It's Yitzchak, because that name, Yitzchak, it denotes a higher level of happiness. It's not laughing, which is a kind of almost automatic response, but it comes from the word simcha. That, yes, and somebody points out that it's also in future tense with the yud, that we will laugh, but we will reach that level of simcha. Az yimale schok pinu, we say, that then our laughter will be full. When do we use that phrase? We all know it from before the benching, from Tehillim. We're talking about when we return to Israel, then we will be fully happy. Then our mouths will be filled only with unadulterated joy and jubilation. If you want to, you can spell that J-E-W-B, jubilation, that we will be full Jews and happy when we come back and we all are living together here in Eretz Yisrael. So we see a different picture here of something going on. It's not an indictment of Sara that she maybe lost faith, that she might have said something that was of a negative character about her, about God, about her husband. That's not what it's all about. She is putting the whole picture together. She is saying, I'm getting this premonition now that we're in with the birth of this child. This is not going to be completely smooth sailing. We're going to go through a crisis of eternal significance. The Akedah is the ultimate trial that Abraham faces, and maybe the ultimate trial that any parent faces, the danger of losing one's child. And Sara is trying to deal with it and be able to come out of it with even greater faith. When the angel tells Abraham that this birth is going to happen, so the pasuk, as we said before, says very mysteriously, Sara shomat petach ha'ohel v'hu acharav. Then Sara hears behind him. But I think what really this v'hu acharav means, not so much that she is physically in a place behind his back, but we're saying that Sara is the prime mover in everything happening here. She's operating at a very stratified spiritual level. She's behind all the emotions that are involved in this whole episode, from the birth of a child in a miraculous way to that child going through, not child, 37 years old, that older child going through this trauma of the Akedah in order to represent what's going to happen to the Jewish people throughout history, that we are going to go through traumatic events that we better be prepared for. And we better have the faith that at the end of the day, we'll be smiling, that we'll be laughing, that we'll be filled with simcha, we'll be happy. And that will get us through it. When a brit milah is held, it's very traumatic, but especially for the mother. It's much more traumatic, I think, for the mother than the father. She carried that child for 9 months. She went through the pains of delivery, and now that child's going to come under the knife. It's very traumatic. And therefore, she is really the one who is connecting to this bracha using the name Yitzchak, but spelled with a sin, in order to send this kind of hidden message that evokes the Akedah and says, yes, you're going through a trauma of this Brit Milah. Maybe you're imagining, what are they doing to my son? What will happen to him in the course of his life? Will he be protected, etc.? And you're connecting to the whole experience of the Akedah. But the conclusion is, Yitzchak will be happy. We'll get through the Brit Milah and we'll celebrate. We'll sing Siman Tov and Mazel Tov. Everything will go well. And this will be a siman for the future that anytime we face any kind of trauma or any kind of threatening situation, especially as a nation, even more so than as an individual, we know that it's going to end right. This is what Sara is trying to convey in this very, very mysterious exchange that I think the words fit in beautifully. That yes, she is concerned, I'm afraid, but she understands that at the end of the day, everything is going to work out well. And she is trying to orchestrate things in a sense from behind, just like the director of a play stands behind the stage and he is or she is responsible for everything that happens on stage. And that I think is the crux of what's going on here in this precursor, in this intro to the Akedah. And I think we can dedicate this to all the Saras of the Jewish people who have this kind of deeper faith and deeper intuition and the ability to orchestrate the events of the family with this strong sense of emunah that everything is going to end happily. Az yimalei stok pinu, then our mouths will be filled with joy when ultimately we pass the test, we come through the crisis, and Bezrat Hashem, not only for our individual families, but for all of Am Yisrael, that we come to the great climactic moment where we experience the birth of the Moshiach and the Geula Shlema B'mheira v'yameinu. Amen. So if anyone, I'm going to look at the chat. I don't know if I can hear, but if anybody has a comment, you can put it down in the chat. We said before that Yitzchak in the future sense, he will laugh, we will laugh, and clearly that's part of our tradition, that we tend to keep this kind of sense of humor, even in the most difficult of situations. And, you know, we learn to laugh and we get through it all. So
I think
we will be back next week, same time, same place. If anybody has a comment, I'm not sure if I'll hear if you unmute yourself. If you want to, you have a minute or two to write in the chat. If not, then I will certainly wish all of you a Shabbat Shalom. And we are in the midst of some amazing Parshiot. All of the Torah is amazing, but Bereshit and Shemot, I think, because of all the stories involved and all the personalities involved, are really tremendous. Yes, Tal writes, there's a great divide after the Akedah. No one in the family ever talk again. Okay, we can think about and discuss that. I wouldn't say I wouldn't, yes, the best comedians are Jewish. That's correct, Esty. I wouldn't say they never talk again. We don't see a lot of talk between we're not privy to it. We do see some discussion, certainly between Yaakov and his wives, Rachel and Leah. We don't see a lot between Rivka and Yitzchak. Maybe we'll talk about that next time. That's a very fascinating aspect of their life. But, you know, we're not given a kind of peek inside the walls of the private lives of the Avot, only when the Torah says this is something you ought to know. So everybody should have Edna, have that pleasure that we talked about before, since Edna's with us. And it is a beautiful name. And we should, I guess, follow that advice for the men out there. Kol asher tomari lecha Sara shma b'kola. Listen to her voice. And we see this, and we'll perhaps talk about it. Rivka is the same. She is guiding things. Yaakov's wives are guiding Yaakov, and everything seems to turn out better when you listen to your wife. So I've done my good deed for the day because Susie is also listening and she's a Sara as well. So everybody have a wonderful Shabbat, and God willing, we will see you next week, same time, same place. Shabbat shalom.
Thank you.